The sea gives and the sea takes. Stephen Callahan knew this. He was a sailor, an adventurer. The ocean was his second home. He set out from the Canary Islands. In his small boat, the Napoleon Solo, he was heading for the Caribbean, living a dream he had worked hard for. But dreams can turn to nightmares in a heartbeat. One night, a week into his journey, a violent crash woke him from his sleep. It felt like an explosion, a brutal sudden impact that tore through the hull. He suspected it was a whale. The boat was taking on water fast, sinking into the cold, black Atlantic. There was no time to think, only to act. Survival is about instinct, about moving when your world is falling apart. He had to abandon ship. The Napoleon Solo, his home and his vessel, was dying beneath his feet. He scrambled to inflate his life raft, a small rubber bubble named Rubber Ducky. He grabbed his emergency kit, a small bag of essentials he had prepared for just such a moment. Water rushed in, pulling his world down into the abyss. He had to cut the raft free before it was dragged down with the boat. He watched the mast of the Napoleon Solo disappear beneath the waves. As the sun rose on his first full day adrift, Stephen Callahan took stock of his new kingdom. The raft, Rubber Ducky, fragile, inflatable vessel, not built for long-term survival. It was his only shield against the sun, the wind, the sea. The space was cramped, barely room to sit up or lie down. Waves became the rhythm of his life, a relentless rocking that never ceased. He learned the raft's every detail, its weak points, its strengths. He checked the seams, the inflation tubes, the small canopy, a sliver of shade. His world, simple, ruled by raw elements. The sun, a relentless enemy, heating the black rubber until it was almost too hot to touch. He had to protect his skin to avoid severe sunburn, dehydration. At night the temperature plummeted. Cold seeped into his bones. He huddled under scraps of material, shivering, listening to the lonely ocean. The raft offered little protection from swings in temperature. The raft became a living thing, a tiny ecosystem in an ocean desert. Barnacles grew on its underside, forming a base for marine life. Small fish gathered in the raft's shadow, seeking shelter. Those fish attracted larger predators, a food chain trailing him across the Atlantic. This mobile reef was a double-edged sword. It provided food, a lifeline in the empty sea, but it also drew dangerous creatures. His rubber island, sanctuary and a target, life and constant threat. Life on the raft, maintenance and observation. He had to be a mechanic, a navigator, a hunter. He checked for leaks and weak spots constantly, knowing that a single puncture could mean death. He patched holes with limited supplies, ingenuity keeping him afloat. He watched the currents, the clouds, the stars for any sense of direction. He drifted west, 800 nautical miles, adapting, innovating, keeping his fragile kingdom whole. In the wild, water is life. Without it, you're finished in days. He couldn't drink the salt water that surrounded him. That would only lead to a faster, more agonizing death. He had 2 solar stills, small, inflatable devices that used the sun to evaporate and condense seawater. These were his most precious tools. On a good day, they could produce just over a pint of fresh water. Not enough to quench his thirst, but enough to keep him alive. He guarded every single drop like gold. When it rained, he used every surface to collect the downpour. He rigged a makeshift tarp to funnel rain into containers. He used cloth to soak dew and wrung it out for sips. Every bit of moisture was a victory. There were days of drought with the sun blazing. The stills produced little, and his thirst became a maddening obsession. He learned desperation but never gave up. Finding water was a daily battle he had to win. Food was the other critical piece. His emergency supplies were minimal. He had to learn to hunt. He fashioned a spear gun from parts on board. He stalked the fish that gathered around his raft. His main prey was the mahi-mahi. They were large and powerful. Landing one was brutal and exhausting. He speared smaller triggerfish. He caught flying fish that landed in the raft. He even captured birds that rested on the vessel. Nothing was wasted. He ate every part of the fish, the meat, the organs, even the eyes. Fishing was more than calories. It was purpose. It gave him a goal each day, focused his mind, and kept despair at bay. He learned sea life behavior and became part of the raft's ecosystem. He scraped and ate barnacles. Each catch was a surge of hope, proof he could survive another day. A primal existence, hunting and gathering at sea, a hunter-gatherer of the ocean. The ocean is never truly calm. It is a place of immense power and unpredictable violence. Callahan faced this reality every day. Storms would roll in with terrifying speed, turning the sea into a churning chaos of giant waves and screaming wind. During these tempests, his tiny raft was tossed about like a toy. Waves would crash over him, filling the raft with water and threatening to capsize it. He would have to bail frantically. He tied himself to the raft to avoid being thrown into the raging water, holding on with all his might as the world turned into a nightmare of wind and spray. The constant exposure to salt water took a heavy toll on his body and his equipment. The raft itself was under relentless attack. The rubber began to deteriorate, and punctures became a frequent, life-threatening problem. He had to become an expert repairman, using a simple patching kit to fix holes in the tubes. One of the pontoons was severely damaged, and he had to constantly re-inflate it. The fear of the raft failing was always with him. He had to be vigilant, checking for wear and tear. His battle was not just with the elements, but with the ocean's inhabitants. Sharks were a constant presence, drawn to the fish beneath his raft. He would see their dark shapes circling, their fins cutting through the water. Sometimes they would bump or even bite at the raft, their curiosity a mortal threat to his fragile home. He used his spear and a paddle to fend them off, a terrifying David and Goliath struggle. He had to stay calm, conserve energy, and show no fear. His body was also breaking down. He lost a third of his weight, his muscles wasting away. Skin, constantly wet with salt water, broke out in sores and boils. The friction rubbed his skin raw. Every movement was an effort. He was racked with pain and exhaustion. It was a war of attrition, but his spirit refused to break. Surviving at sea is not just a physical challenge. It is a brutal mental game. For 76 days, Stephen Callahan's only companion was himself. The loneliness was a crushing weight, a silence so profound it was almost a sound. Days bled into weeks with no sign of another human being. To keep his sanity, he had to create a routine. He talked to himself, narrating his actions, working through problems aloud. He kept a log, scratching down notes about his position, the weather, and his thoughts. Writing was a connection to his former life, a way to mark the passage of time. Hope is a powerful fuel, but it can also be a dangerous mirage. He would scan the horizon for hours, every day. Several times, he spotted vessels in the distance. He would fire his flares, heart pounding with desperate hope, only to watch them continue on, oblivious. Each disappearance was a devastating blow. He learned to manage hope, a steady flame, not a wildfire. His mind became a landscape of memories, friends, family, loved ones, a comfort and a torture. They reminded him what he was fighting to regain. Hallucinations crept in, shapes in clouds, voices in wind. Reality and illusion began to blur, yet his will to live remained unbreakable. He found a spiritual connection to the universe, not as a navigator, but a man seeking place in the cosmos. He accepted his situation, refused to surrender. His mind, though battered, remained his greatest weapon. After 76 days adrift, the end came suddenly. He was weak, emaciated, covered in sores. His raft was barely holding together. Hope had dwindled to a tiny spark when he saw something that changed everything. Birds. Not just a few, a flock, hovering, diving. He knew those birds often followed a fishing boat. For the first time in months, hope electrified him. He fired one of his last flares. Someone saw it. A small fishing boat appeared on the horizon, heading straight for him. The long nightmare was finally ending. The fishermen could hardly believe their eyes. More skeleton than flesh, but unbroken spirit. The birds had led them. He was rescued on April 20th, 1982, off Marie Galante, southeast of Guadeloupe. He had drifted 1,800 nautical miles. They gave him water, food, and the human contact he'd craved. But the rescue was not the end. His body was a wreck. He was taken to a local hospital. He had lost a third of his body weight, suffered severe malnutrition and dehydration. Saltwater sores needed careful treatment. It took 6 long weeks before he could walk properly again. His muscles had atrophied. He had to relearn movement. Recovery was slow and painful. His mind needed to heal too. After more than 2 months alone, the noise and speed overwhelmed him. He had to process trauma, fear, loneliness, and near death. But he survived, forged by the sea with a story the world needed to hear. Stephen Callahan did more than just survive. He returned with a powerful story of human resilience. He chronicled his ordeal in Adrift 76 Days Lost at Sea, published in 1986, an instant classic that stayed on the New York Times list for more than 36 weeks. Not just adventure, a meditation on survival, hope, and the human spirit. It became required reading for sailors, adventurers, and endurance students. His innovations in water collection, catching food, and raft repair informed survival manuals. In 2024, his story reached a new generation with 76 Days Adrift, executive produced by Academy Award winner Ang Lee. Director Joe Wine used an actual 1980s Avon raft and identical equipment, even filming adrift in the Atlantic for raw authenticity. A haunting score by Patrick Stump deepened the emotion. The documentary earned widespread praise and awards momentum. Callahan's story reminds us of our relationship with nature. It teaches respect for the ocean and the importance of preparation. Its deepest lesson is the power within ourselves. Even when you lose your boat, your supplies, your connection to the world, you can still find the strength to fight. He faced storms, sharks, starvation, and crippling loneliness, but he held on. His crossing was more than distance. It was a voyage of will. His survival proves that no matter how vast the ocean, the human spirit is vaster still.